Hello everyone and welcome back to Nocturnal Narrative Studio. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know which country you're listening from. Without further ado, let's begin the story. I never wanted to buy that house. My wife Ellie fell in love with it the moment we pulled into the driveway. It was one of those old craftsman homes, built in the 1930s with dark wood trim and a wide front porch. The kind of place that looks like it belongs on a postcard about small-town America. The price was surprisingly good for the neighborhood, which should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. "Just imagine Christmas mornings in that living room," Ellie had said, squeezing my hand as the realtor unlocked the front door. "Think about how amazing it'll be to start our family here." I couldn't say no to her. I never could. So we signed the papers, emptied our savings account, and moved in 3 weeks later. The first few nights were fine. We were too busy unpacking and arranging furniture to notice anything strange. But once we settled in, once the boxes were gone, and the pictures were hung on the walls, that's when I started to feel it. A weird sense that we weren't alone in the house. I blamed it on the normal creaks and groans of an old house. My dad had always said that houses talk, especially the old ones. They shift and settle over time, wood expanding and contracting with the weather. Normal stuff, nothing to worry about. But this was different. The sounds I heard didn't seem random. Sometimes they followed a pattern, like footsteps moving from one room to another, and they always seemed to happen when I was alone. I didn't tell Ellie at first. She was so happy there, and I didn't want to spoil it with what was likely just my imagination running wild. She'd always been the practical one in our relationship, the one who found logical explanations for everything. About 3 weeks after we moved in, I was in the basement trying to set up a small workshop. The previous owners had left behind some old shelving units that I wanted to repurpose. As I was moving one of them away from the wall, I noticed something odd. The baseboard behind it didn't quite match the rest of the wall. It was newer, cleaner somehow. Being curious, I knelt down to take a closer look. The baseboard was actually loose. When I pulled on it, the whole section came away, revealing a small opening in the wall, maybe 2 feet high and just as wide. Sat back on my heels, staring at the dark hole. It had to be some kind of access panel, right? For plumbing or electrical work? But as I leaned forward and shined my phone's flashlight inside, I realized it was much more than that. It was a tunnel, narrow but tall enough for someone to crawl through on hands and knees. And it seemed to go deeper into the house, beyond where the basement wall should have ended. My heart started racing as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I thought about calling Ellie down to look, but something stopped me. What if it was nothing? What if it was just some weird architectural quirk? I grabbed a flashlight from my toolbox and, against my better judgment, started crawling into the tunnel. The air inside was stale but not musty, like it had been disturbed recently. The passage curved to the right after about 10 feet, then opened into a small space, maybe 4 feet high and 6 feet wide. It was empty except for a few items pushed against one wall. A small cushion, an empty water bottle, and what looked like a child's drawing on a crumpled piece of paper. I picked up the drawing with shaking hands. It showed stick figures of what seemed to be a family. A tall one, a medium one, and 2 small ones. They were standing next to a house that looked a lot like ours. The tall figure had been colored in completely with black crayon, while the others were just outlines. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I stared at the drawing. This wasn't a maintenance tunnel. This was something else entirely. I backed out of the space quickly, nearly hitting my head on the low ceiling. Once I was back in the basement, I replaced the baseboard as best I could and pushed the shelving unit back against the wall. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly grip the wood. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. I kept thinking about that drawing and what it might mean. Who had made it? When? And more importantly, were they still somewhere in our house? I didn't tell Ellie about what I found. Not right away. She had just gotten a promotion at work and was already stressed about proving herself. The last thing she needed was to worry about some weird hidden passage that probably hadn't been used in years. But then things started happening that I couldn't ignore. Small things at first. Objects moved from where we'd left them. Food disappeared from the kitchen overnight. And the noises in the walls got louder, more distinct. One morning, about a week after I found the tunnel, Ellie asked me if I'd been in her office during the night. "Your office? No, why?" I asked, pouring coffee into my mug. She frowned, stirring cream into her own cup. Someone was. My desk chair was pulled out and some of my papers were moved around. "Maybe you forgot to push it in yesterday?" She shook her head. "No, I specifically remember tucking it under the desk before I came to bed, and my laptop was open. I always close it at night." A chill ran down my spine, but I forced a smile. "Probably just sleepwalking. You've been working so hard lately." But I knew it wasn't sleepwalking, and I had a sinking feeling that whatever was going on had something to do with that tunnel in the basement. That night after Ellie went to sleep, I did something I'm not proud of. I set up my phone to record video in the hallway outside our bedroom. I propped it on a small table, hidden behind a plant, with a clear view of both our bedroom door and the stairs. Then I went to bed, lying awake for hours before finally drifting off. The next morning, I retrieved the phone before Ellie woke up. My hands were shaking as I opened the video app. Most of the footage showed an empty, dark hallway, but at 2:17 a.m. something moved at the top of the stairs. I had to replay that section several times before I could make sense of what I was seeing. It was a person, a small person, moving with careful, deliberate steps. A child, I thought at first, but the proportions weren't quite right. The arms were too long, the head too large for the body, and it moved strangely, with a jerky, unnatural gait. Whatever it was, it paused at the top of the stairs, seeming to listen. Then it turned its head, looking directly at the camera. Its face was too shadowed to make out any features, but I had the terrible feeling that it knew it was being watched. After a moment, it turned away and moved down the hallway, stopping outside our bedroom door. It stood there for a long time, one hand raised as if about to knock. Then it lowered its hand and pressed its face against the door instead, staying that way for nearly 5 minutes before finally turning and disappearing back down the stairs. I deleted the video immediately. I didn't want any record of what I'd seen. I didn't want proof that something was living in our house watching us while we slept. That day at work, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept returning to the figure in the video, to the tunnel, in the basement, to the child's drawing. I left early, stopping at a hardware store on the way home to buy new locks for all our doors. Ellie was confused when she came home and found me installing a deadbolt on our bedroom door. "What's going on?" she asked, setting down her purse. "Did something happen?" I couldn't lie to her anymore. "I think there might be someone in the house," I said, not looking up from my work. "Or multiple someones." She laughed, but it was nervous, uncertain. "What do you mean, like burglars?" "No, not burglars. I think there might be people living in the walls." I told her everything then. About the tunnel in the basement, the drawing I found, the noises I'd been hearing. I didn't mention the video. I couldn't bring myself to describe what I'd seen standing outside our bedroom door. She didn't believe me at first. Of course she didn't. It sounded crazy, the kind of thing you'd hear in a campfire story. But she agreed to come look at the tunnel in the basement. We went down together, moving the shelving, unit aside. The baseboard came away just as easily as before, revealing the dark opening. Ellie stared at it, her face pale. "This has to be some kind of service access," she said, but her voice wavered. "For plumbing or something." "Look at how it curves," I said, shining the flashlight inside. "It goes deeper into the house." And I found things in there, Ellie. A cushion, a drawing. Someone's been using this. She shook her head, stepping back. No, that can't be right. Houses don't have people living in the walls. That's not real. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. She believed me, even if she didn't want to. We spent that night in a hotel. The next day, we called a contractor to come look at the house. He was an older guy named Bill, with calloused hands and a no-nonsense attitude. I showed him the tunnel in the basement, and his reaction wasn't what I expected. "Ah, you found one of them," he said, nodding as if this was perfectly normal. "One of them?" Ellie echoed, her voice tight. "There are more?" Bill nodded again. "Oh, sure. Houses from this era, especially in this neighborhood, they're full of these passages. Prohibition-era stuff, mostly. Places to hide booze, secret ways to get in and out if the police showed up." He leaned down, examining the opening. "Though this one's been kept up better than most. Usually they're all rotted out by now. But I found things in there," I insisted. "Recent things. Someone's been using it." Bill straightened up, looking at me with a mix of sympathy and doubt. "Probably just kids at some point. Neighborhood youngsters finding a cool hiding spot. Nothing to worry about." But there was something in his eyes. A flicker of something that made me think he wasn't telling us everything. After Bill left, promising to send us a quote for sealing up the tunnel, Ellie and I had a long talk. We decided to spend one more night in the house. If nothing happened, we'd stay and deal with the tunnel. If anything strange occurred, we'd put the house on the market immediately. That night, we locked our bedroom door and pushed a dresser in, front of it for good measure. I kept a baseball bat next to the bed, and Ellie had her phone ready to call 911 at the first sign of trouble. We lay in bed, too tense to sleep, listening to every creak and groan of the house. For hours, nothing happened, just the normal sounds of an old house settling. Then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., we heard it. A soft tapping sound coming from inside the wall next to our bed. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Ellie's hand found mine, under the covers, gripping it tight. The tapping stopped, then started again, this time in a different rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. And then, most terrifying of all, a voice. Soft, barely audible, but definitely coming from inside the wall. "We know you found our door," it whispered. "We've been watching you for so long." Ellie let out a small choked sob. I sat up, grabbing the baseball bat. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" Silence for a moment. Then the voice came again, sounding closer somehow. "We want what we've always wanted, to be part of the family." "We don't have a family," Ellie said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tears on her face. "It's just us." A soft laugh came from the wall. "Not yet, but you will. And when the baby comes, we'll be here. We've always been here, watching over the children in this house." Ellie's hand went to her stomach. "We hadn't told anyone yet. It was too early, just 6 weeks. We hadn't even put it in writing or said it out loud to anyone but each other." "How?" she whispered. "How could you know that?" "We see everything," the voice said. "We hear everything. Every whisper, every heartbeat. We've been with this house longer than the house has stood on this land." I swung the bat, smashing it into the wall. Plaster cracked and fell away, revealing the wooden studs beneath. And between those studs, peering through the broken wall, was a face. Not human, not entirely. The proportions were wrong. The skin, too pale, the eyes too large and round. It blinked at us, lips curling back to reveal teeth that were sharp and numerous. "You shouldn't have done that," it said, voice clearer now without the wall in the way. "This is our home too. We've protected it for generations, protected the families that live here. You need to leave," I said, raising the bat again. "Now." It cocked its head to one side, studying me. "We can't leave. We are the house. And now you're part of us too." From elsewhere in the house, we heard movement. Soft footsteps, whispers, the sound of small bodies moving through tight spaces. More of them, coming closer. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. We grabbed our phones and car keys and ran, leaving everything else behind. We drove straight to Ellie's parents' house, 2 states away, and didn't look back. We never returned to that house. We hired people to pack up our belongings and sell the place. The new owners, a young family with 2 small children, seemed thrilled with their purchase. When we warned them about what we'd experienced, they laughed it off as new house jitters. Sometimes wonder if they've found the tunnels yet, if they've heard the tapping in the walls or the whispers in the night, if they've glimpsed those not quite human faces watching them through cracks and vents. I wonder if they know they're never truly alone in that house, that they're being watched always by the family in the walls. Ellie and I have a new home now, a newly built place with no history, no hidden spaces. Our daughter was born here, safe from whatever lived in our first house. But sometimes when the house is quiet and still, I find myself listening for sounds in the walls, for the soft tap, tap, tap that would tell me they've followed us here, that they're still watching. So far, there's been nothing, but I still check, behind every outlet cover, inside every air vent. And when my daughter talks about her imaginary friends who live in her closet, I feel a chill that goes all the way to my bones. Because some families never leave. Some families stay in the walls, watching and waiting for generations to come. There's something about old houses, especially farmhouses, that makes you feel like they're not quite done with their stories. They're not just buildings, they're living, breathing things. You walk through their halls and you get the sense that they've seen countless things, felt countless footsteps, and held countless secrets. But no matter how old or worn they get, they always find a way to leave their mark on anyone who steps into them. I moved into a farmhouse just like that. It wasn't a grand place, but it had its charm. Worn wooden floors, faded wallpaper, and big drafty rooms. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Well, mine for now. It had an old guest room tucked away at the end of the hall. I didn't pay much attention to it at first, just a room. Not too big, not too small. Just your standard spare bedroom. The kind you keep ready for guests, though I didn't have many of those. That changed when my sister, Rachel, came to visit. She wasn't the type to stay long, but she'd agreed to come over for a few days. I figured it'd be nice, even if it was just for a weekend. I showed her around the house, and when we reached the guest room, she seemed off. She didn't say much, but I noticed the way she looked at the bed. It was as if she had seen it before, even though we'd only just moved in. "Did you make the bed already?" she asked, her voice low. I frowned. I didn't touch it. It was true. When I opened the door earlier, the bed had been in disarray, but now the sheets were neatly tucked in, the pillows fluffed up, and the blankets folded at the foot like someone had been there and tidied up. I thought it was strange, but I shrugged it off. Maybe I had just been careless when I showed her the room earlier. Or maybe it was one of those things that happens when you're in an old house. Things shift, move around on their own. Rachel wasn't convinced, though. She gave me a long look, like she was trying to figure something out. "That's weird," she muttered, but didn't press the issue. We went about our evening, and I thought nothing more of it. The night passed quietly, though something about the room kept me from fully relaxing. Maybe it was the way the air felt different in there, colder somehow, even though the rest of the house was warm. Or maybe it was the way Rachel kept glancing at the door when she thought I wasn't looking. The next morning, the bed was made again, perfectly. I hadn't even been in the room since the night before. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Old house, old creaks, weird little things happening. It wasn't like anything had truly happened. I mean, maybe Rachel was right. Maybe I just didn't remember making the bed. I was tired after all. But then things started happening more regularly. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was standing at the foot of the bed just watching me. I'd sit up, heart racing, only to find nothing there. I thought I was imagining it, but after a few nights of the same thing, I wasn't so sure. It felt like someone was just waiting for me to notice them, and the bed. It kept getting made. Every morning, without fail, the blankets were folded just so, the pillows stacked in a neat line. It wasn't like any of the other rooms in the house. It was meticulous, the kind of neatness that didn't come naturally. I started avoiding the guest room, hoping if I stayed away, whatever it was would leave me alone. But that didn't work. It just made things worse. One night I woke up to a soft knock at my door. It was gentle at first, like someone wasn't sure if they should be disturbing me. I laid there, frozen. The knock came again, a little louder. Then again. "Rachel?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, but when I opened the door, no one was there. I looked down the hall. The guest room door was wide open. I walked over to it slowly, heart pounding in my chest, trying to talk myself out of it. It was just my imagination, just the house settling, but when I peeked inside, the room was different. The bed had been made, yes, but something was off. The covers were arranged in a way that didn't make sense, as if someone had been lying in it, but not for sleep. The pillows were angled strangely, the sheets pulled tightly as if a person had been sitting on the bed waiting. I stepped in just a few inches to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. A face in the mirror, reflected behind me. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Rachel's. It wasn't anyone I knew. It was just a face, pale, expressionless, and staring back at me. I spun around, heart hammering. The room was empty. I was alone. But that face stayed with me, even as I backed away from the room, closing the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the bed. It was something else, something that had been waiting. I moved out a week later. The house was beautiful, but I couldn't stay there anymore. Something about the guest room just didn't feel right. Maybe it never did. And when I finally left, I couldn't help but wonder if the room would ever be empty again, or if it would just keep arranging itself for whoever came next. I don't know what was in that room or who it was waiting for, but I know one thing for sure. It wasn't me. Love the story? Show us with a like, hit that subscribe button, and share your scariest idea in the comments. And don't forget to tell us the time and where you're listening from. We want to know where the fear is spreading. It was supposed to be the perfect winter getaway. Just Karen, Ella, and me in a cabin high in the mountains, surrounded by the quiet stillness of snow-covered trees and the promise of a few days away from the world. The kind of escape that only a cabin in the middle of nowhere could offer. No distractions, no noise, just us, some books, hot cocoa, and the cold outside. We arrived late one evening, the sun already gone and the only light coming from the headlights of our car. The snow was falling thickly, turning the roads into a blur of white. As we unloaded the car, I could feel the chill in the air, the kind that bites at your skin, sharp and unforgiving. The cabin was everything I had hoped for, rustic, cozy, with a large stone fireplace and a view of the forest that stretched for miles. It was perfect, until it wasn't. The first night passed without incident. We settled in by the fire, shared stories, and tried to get a good night's rest. But something wasn't right. I couldn't place my finger on it. The house was warm enough, but there was an odd heaviness in the air, as if the cabin was holding its breath. In the morning, we woke up to the sound of fresh snow crunching outside. I went to the window to look out over the yard, expecting to see a smooth blanket of white. But there, just in front of the cabin, were footprints, deep and clear, as if someone had walked right up to the door. That wouldn't have been unusual if we hadn't been the only ones on the road. We'd passed an abandoned car on the way up, and there were no neighbors for miles. The only other signs of life were the occasional wildlife tracks in the snow. But these footprints were human-sized and fresh. They weren't there when we arrived, and I was certain we hadn't heard anyone during the night. Maybe someone else came by during the night, Karen suggested, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I went outside following the prints, but they didn't lead anywhere. They stopped at the edge of the driveway, as if the person had simply disappeared. I shrugged it off as my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe someone else had been hiking nearby, maybe it was just a mistake. But the uneasy feeling stuck with me. As the day went on, the snow kept falling, thicker and faster. The roads were becoming more treacherous, and the wind howled against the cabin's walls. We decided to stay inside, play board games, and keep the fire going. But by the time evening came, something was different. The knocking started. At first, it was soft, like the wind tapping against the window. I didn't think much of it. The storm was picking up, the snow was falling harder, and the wind was making strange noises as it swept through the trees. But then the knocking came again, louder this time, and from somewhere inside the cabin. I froze. Karen noticed too. Ella had already fallen asleep by the fire, curled up on the couch with a blanket. But now, the house felt off, like it was closing in on us. "Did you hear that?" I asked Karen, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded, her eyes wide. "It's coming from the attic." I didn't want to go up there, but I knew I had to. There was no way we could ignore it. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the attic trapdoor, which was tucked away behind the kitchen. Karen followed closely behind me, her face pale with fear. The attic was cold, the air thick with dust. I opened the trapdoor slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. The knocking continued, now louder and more persistent. It was coming from inside the walls, I realized. It wasn't just random, it was deliberate, like someone or something was trying to get our attention. We stepped inside, the light from my flashlight casting long shadows across the beams of the ceiling. The space was mostly empty, save for a few old boxes and forgotten furniture. But the knocking, it was still there, like someone was trying to break through the walls. And then we saw it. At the far corner of the room, near the window, were new footprints, fresh in the dust. Not just any footprints, though. They were smaller, almost childlike, leading from one side of the attic to the other. I followed them with my flashlight, but there was no sign of anyone. The footprints stopped suddenly, as if they had just disappeared into thin air. My heart raced. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew we weren't alone in this cabin. I pulled Karen out of the attic and slammed the trapdoor shut. We went back downstairs, but the house still felt wrong. The knocking had stopped, but now the silence was almost worse. That night we huddled together on the couch, the fire crackling in the background, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread that had settled over us. Ella had woken up at some point, her wide eyes searching the room as if she too could feel it. I told her it was just the storm, just the wind making strange noises. But deep down I wasn't sure anymore. Around midnight I heard something again. This time it wasn't a knock. It was a faint whisper, as if someone was standing just outside the door, breathing. My blood ran cold. I didn't move, didn't make a sound, afraid that any movement would somehow make it worse. The whisper grew louder, clearer. It was a child's voice, soft and high-pitched, almost like singing. But the words, they didn't make sense. They were jumbled, like a language I couldn't understand. I went to the door, my hand shaking as I gripped the handle. I opened it slowly, but there was nothing there, just the howling wind and the endless snowfall. The footprints were gone, swept away by the storm. No sign of anyone, no sign of anything. It was like the world outside had swallowed them whole. The next morning, the snow had stopped. The roads were still impassable, but the storm had passed. I went outside to check the area again, but there was nothing to find. No more footprints. No signs of anyone having been there. But the feeling didn't leave. It stayed with us, like a weight on our shoulders. The whispering, the footsteps, the child's voice. It all seemed too real to ignore. And as we packed, up to leave, I couldn't help but feel like we were leaving something behind. I don't know what happened that night or who or what was in that cabin with us. But I know this. There's something in those mountains. Something that waits for the snow to fall, for the isolation to set in, and for people like us to come, unknowing. And when we left, I felt like we'd been visited by something far older and far darker than we could ever imagine. Something that had been waiting in the snow. We never went back to that cabin, and I'm not sure I ever will. I never wanted Grandmother Eleanor's house. The moment I heard it was coming to me in her will, a knot formed in my stomach that hasn't gone away since. Everyone thought I'd be happy. A debt-free Victorian mansion in a town where property values keep climbing. My cousins were green with envy at the reading of the will, but they didn't know what I knew. They hadn't spent those summers there as a child, hearing things move through the halls after dark, seeing shapes at the edge of mirrors that shouldn't have been there. I hadn't been back to that house in 15 years, not since I was 13 and told my parents I wouldn't return. They thought it was just teenage drama. They didn't believe me when I tried to tell them about the voices, about the cold spots, about the way Grandmother Eleanor would talk to empty rooms like they were filled with people. People only she could see. They've been here longer than us. Sarah, she would say when I asked who she was talking to. They were here when the house was built, and they'll be here long after we're gone. But don't worry, they like us. After she died, I had no choice but to go back. The lawyer insisted I needed to at least look at what I'd inherited, decide what to do with it. Sell it, rent it, move in. Those were my options. I planned on signing whatever papers would get it on the market fastest. I picked a bright Tuesday, morning in June, to make the drive up. The kind of day that feels too sunny, too alive for anything creepy to happen. I parked in the circular driveway, gravel crunching under my tires, and stared up at the house through my windshield. It looked exactly the same. 3 stories of weathered red brick, white trim around tall windows, a wraparound porch with elaborate woodwork that my grandmother had always kept painted pristine white. The place was huge. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, plus all the extra spaces that old houses have. Sitting rooms and studies and little nooks with no clear purpose. As a kid, I'd loved exploring all those spaces, until I realized I wasn't always exploring them alone. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my overnight bag from the passenger seat and headed for the front door. The lawyer had sent me the keys a week ago, a heavy ring with at least a dozen different ones, all unlabeled. It took me 3 tries to find the right one for the front door. The foyer smelled like lemon polish and something else, a faint, sweet scent I couldn't quite place. Roses, maybe? Grandmother always kept fresh flowers in the house, but she'd been gone for nearly a month now, so that couldn't be it. I stood there for a moment, listening. The house creaked and settled around me, old wood adjusting to the heat of the day. Normal house sounds, I told myself. Nothing more. Grandmother's things were still everywhere. Her reading glasses on the side table in the living room, her favorite Afghan draped over the back of the couch, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table, her neat handwriting filling in most of the squares. It was like she had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any second. I moved further into the house, past the grand staircase with its dark wood banister, and into the kitchen. It had been updated sometime in the 1990s, but still had an old-fashioned feel with its white cabinets and black and white checkered floor. A tea kettle sat on the stove. I touched it, cold. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet, was a note in Grandmother's handwriting. Sarah, welcome home. We've been waiting for you. My blood ran cold. I snatched the note off the fridge, reading it again. It had to be old, from one of my childhood visits, but the paper looked new, the ink fresh, and more troubling. I hadn't told anyone I was coming today, not even the lawyer. A floorboard creaked overhead, the unmistakable sound of weight shifting on old wood. I froze, looking up at the ceiling. Another creak, then another. Footsteps moving across what would be Grandmother's bedroom directly above the kitchen. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and frightened even to my own ears. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched out, heavy and expectant. Then, clear as day, a door closed upstairs. I should have left right then. Should have dropped the keys on the counter, gotten in my car, and never looked back. But some mix of curiosity and stubborn pride kept me rooted to the spot. This was my house now. If someone was trespassing, I had a right to know. I grabbed a knife from the butcher block on the counter and slowly made my way to the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight as I climbed, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet house. At the top, I paused, listening again. Nothing. The door to grandmother's room was closed. I approached it slowly, knife held out in front of me like some ridiculous movie character. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. The room was empty. Grandmother's four-poster bed was neatly made, covered with the same blue and white quilt that had been there since I was a child. Her silver-backed hairbrush sat on the vanity, a few gray hairs still caught in the bristles. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in a soft, muted light. No one was there. No sign that anyone had been. I checked the closet, then under the bed, feeling silly but needing to be sure. Nothing. I even opened the window, wondering if someone could have climbed out somehow, but the old-fashioned latch was stiff with disuse. It hadn't been opened in a long time. Confused and more than a little unsettled, I went back downstairs. The note from the refrigerator was still in my hand, crumpled now from my tight grip. I smoothed it out on the counter, studying grandmother's distinctive handwriting. The way she made her S's was unmistakable, with a little extra flourish at the top. This was no old note. Someone had written this recently. Someone who could perfectly mimic my grandmother's handwriting. But who? And why? I decided to check the rest of the house before dark. Room by room, I went through the first floor. The formal dining room with its massive oak table, the study with walls lined with leather-bound books, the sunroom at the back that overlooked the overgrown garden. Everything was exactly as I remembered, but tinged with a sense of waiting that I couldn't explain. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself avoiding the third floor. As a child, that had been where the others lived, according to grandmother. The rooms up there had remained mostly unused during my visits, except for the occasional guest. But grandmother would still go up daily, talking to people who weren't there, bringing fresh towels to empty rooms. They liked their privacy, she would tell me when I asked why no one could use those rooms. But they're happy to share the house with us as long as we respect their space. The sun was setting by the time I finished exploring the second floor. I considered just sleeping in my car, but my pride wouldn't let me. This was my house now. I wasn't going to be scared away by creaky floors and strange notes. I chose my old bedroom for the night, the one I'd used during summer visits. It was on the second floor near the back of the house, with a view of the garden, and beyond that, the small family cemetery where generations of my ancestors were buried, including now, grandmother Eleanor. The room had been kept the same all these years. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, and a twin bed with a patchwork quilt. I set my bag on the bed and pulled out my phone to call my boyfriend, Matt, before it got too late. "Hey, how's the haunted house?" he asked by way of greeting. He thought my childhood fears were amusing, something I'd grown out of but still remembered, with a kind of embarrassed nostalgia. "It's weird," I admitted, not wanting to tell him about the note or the footsteps. He'd just think I was letting my imagination run wild. The place is huge, and it feels strange being back after so long. But no ghosts yet? I could hear the smile in his voice. "No ghosts," I lied. "Look, I'm going to try to get some sleep. I'll call you tomorrow once I've talked to the real estate agent." "Sounds good. Love you." "Love you too," I replied, ending the call. I took a quick shower in the hall bathroom, changed into my pajamas, and climbed into the bed. It was too small, really. I'd been a child the last time I slept in it, and now my feet nearly hung off the end. But somehow the familiar feel of the mattress and the smell of the laundry detergent grandmother had always used on the sheets was comforting. Despite my nervousness, I fell asleep quickly. The day's drive and the emotional weight of being back in this house had worn me out. I woke sometime in the deep of night, the room pitch black around me. Something had pulled me from sleep. A sound, a presence. I lay still, listening. Tap, tap, tap. Like fingernails on wood. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming. From the closet door. I reached for my phone on the bedside table, fumbling in the dark. The screen lit up as I grabbed it. 3:17 a.m. The blue-white light illuminated just enough of the room for me to see that the closet door, which I'd left firmly shut, was now open a crack. The tapping came again. Tap, Tap, tap. A pause. Then again, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. Who's there? I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Then a voice, soft, female, and terrifyingly familiar. Sarah, you've come home at last. It was grandmother's voice. I scrambled out of bed, backing toward the door to the hall. The closet door began to open wider, moving slowly on its hinges. Stay away, I said, louder now. Whoever you are, stay away from me. The door stopped moving. Another long silence. Then, don't you recognize me, Sarah? It's grandmother. You're not her, I said, my back pressed against the wall now. My grandmother is dead. A soft laugh came from the darkened closet. Dead? Oh no, dear, not dead. Just changed. We all change when we join the house. With shaking hands, I turned on my phone's flashlight and pointed it toward the closet. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the space inside. Empty hangers swayed slightly, as if disturbed by a breeze. But there was no breeze in the closed room. And worse, no one was there. The voice had come from an empty closet. Where are you? I demanded, sweeping the light around the room. Show yourself. I'm right here. Sarah. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We're all here. The Blackwoods have always been here in this house, in these walls. 5 generations now, and you're the last of us. We've been waiting so long for you to come home. My heart hammered in my chest as I edged toward the bedroom door. I'm not staying. I'm selling this place. I never wanted it. Another laugh, this one colder. You can't sell what isn't truly yours. This house belongs to all of us, the living and the others. Your grandmother understood that. She embraced her role as caretaker, as you will in time. I reached the door and grabbed the handle, turning it. It didn't move. Locked somehow, though there was no lock on this door. I rattled it desperately. Let me out, I shouted, no longer caring how crazy I sounded. Right now. But you've only just arrived, grandmother's voice said, now directly behind me. There's so much to show you, so much to teach you before you can take your place here. I whirled around, flashlight beam cutting wildly through the room. For a split second, I caught sight of a figure, a woman in an old-fashioned nightgown, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. But before I could focus on her face, she was gone, like smoke dispersing in the air. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice breaking. Want? The voice was farther away now, near the window. We don't want anything from you, Sarah. We want you to join us, to be part of what we've built here, what we protect. And what is that exactly? A pause. Power, knowledge, life beyond life. Your grandmother knew the rituals, kept the old ways alive. Now it's your turn. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, my breath fogging in the air. The flashlight on my phone flickered, then went out, plunging me back into darkness. I could hear movement all around me now. Footsteps, whispers, the rustling of fabric. The house needs a living caretaker, the voice continued, now seeming to come from inside my own head. Someone of Blackwood blood to maintain the balance between the worlds. Your grandmother served for 60 years. Now the duty falls to you. And if I refuse? I asked, still rattling the door handle uselessly. The whispering around me grew louder, words in a language I didn't recognize. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. Something cold brushed against my cheek. A hand? A breath? There is no refusing, Sarah. There is only accepting with grace or fighting a battle you cannot win. The house has chosen you. We have chosen you. Suddenly, the door beneath my hand gave way, swinging open so quickly that I fell backwards into the hallway. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not looking back, down the stairs and through the darkened house. I didn't stop for my bag, my keys, anything. Just ran straight out the front door into my car. The engine turned over on the first try, thankfully, and I sped down the driveway, gravel spraying behind my tires. In the rearview mirror, I saw lights coming on in the house, room by room, as if someone was moving through it. But I knew there was no one else there. No one living anyway. I drove straight through the night, stopping only for gas, and was back in my apartment by morning. For 3 days I didn't answer calls from the lawyer handling grandmother's estate. I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had happened, what I had experienced. He'd think I was crazy. Maybe I was. But on the 4th day, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name and address in that familiar handwriting. Grandmother's flowing script with the flourished S at the beginning of my name. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, the kind grandmother had always used for her correspondence. The message was brief. The house is waiting, Sarah. We are waiting. You can run, but you belong with us, with me. Come home. Below that was a small sketch of the house, perfectly rendered in black ink. And in one of the 3rd floor windows, a face was watching, a face that looked a lot like mine. I burned the letter in my kitchen sink, watching the paper curl and blacken. Then I called the lawyer and told him I'd changed my mind. I would be moving into grandmother Eleanor's house after all, because the thing about an unwelcome inheritance is that sometimes you don't get to choose what's passed down to you. Sometimes it chooses you instead. I've been living in the house for 3 months now. At first I kept all the lights on, jumped at every sound, couldn't sleep through the night. But gradually, things have changed. I've started to understand what grandmother meant about the others, about the house itself. I talk to them now the way she did. They answer, sometimes with words, sometimes with feelings, or images placed directly into my mind. They show me things, memories of the past, glimpses of what might be. They teach me the rituals, the words of power, the ways to bend reality just a little, just enough. I've started preparing the 3rd floor rooms for guests, the way grandmother did. The others like everything just so. Fresh flowers, beds made, with hospital corners, curtains open precisely 3 inches on each side. Sometimes I catch glimpses of them in mirrors or out of the corner of my eye. Faces that look like mine, like grandmother's, like portraits of ancestors I've only seen in old photographs. The Blackwoods who came before, who built this house, who never truly left it. I haven't told Matt any of this. He thinks I'm just settling in, dealing with grief, finding peace in connecting with my grandmother's memory. He visits on weekends sometimes, but he never stays overnight. Says the house gives him the creeps, though he tries to joke about it. That's fine. The house isn't meant for him, it's meant for me, for us. The living and the others together in these walls. I understand now why grandmother left the house to me specifically. Why it had to be me. I have the gift, like she did. The ability to see both worlds, to exist in the in-between spaces. Last night, I woke to find her sitting at the foot of my bed. Not a dream, not a ghost exactly, but something more substantial. More real. She looked younger than I remembered, her silver hair now streaked with chestnut, her hands smooth and unwrinkled. "You're doing well," she said, smiling at me with familiar eyes. "Soon you'll be ready for the final step." "What final step?" I asked, no longer afraid of these midnight conversations. Her smile widened, showing too many teeth. "To truly join us, of course. To become part of the house forever, as I have. As we all have." She reached out then, her hand passing through mine like mist, but I could feel it nonetheless. Cold and somehow hungry. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "Then you'll understand everything." She faded as dawn approached, becoming less solid, less present, until she was just a suggestion of a person, an outline against the growing light. The last thing to disappear was her smile. I should be terrified. I should be running away, selling the house, burning it to the ground. But I'm not. Because despite everything, this feels right. Like coming home after a long journey. Like fulfilling a purpose I never knew I had. And sometimes, late at night, I find myself standing at the window looking out at the world beyond, at the people passing by on the street. Looking at them the way the others once looked at me, with a mixture of hunger and anticipation and something almost like love. I've always been a light sleeper. Ever since I was a kid, the smallest noise could snap me wide awake. A car passing outside, the hum of the refrigerator kicking on, even the sound of my own breathing sometimes. My ex used to joke that I could hear a mouse sneeze from 3 apartments away. She wasn't wrong. So when I tell you that I know someone else was in my apartment at night, I'm not being paranoid. I'm not making it up. And I'm definitely not crazy. It started about 2 months after I moved into the Westfield Apartments, a renovated factory building downtown that had been converted into lofts. The place was a steel, hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, huge windows that let in tons of natural light. Way nicer than I could typically afford on my graphic designer salary. But the landlord seemed eager to fill the units, offering me 2 months at half price if I signed a year-long lease. I should have asked why they were so desperate for tenants. The first few weeks were perfect. I settled in, arranged my furniture, got to know the neighborhood, met a few of the other residents, mostly young professionals like me, though there were a couple of older folks who'd been there since the conversion 5 years earlier. Everyone seemed nice enough, if a bit reserved. No one really talked about the building or its history, which I didn't think much about at the time. Then came that first night, March 7th. I remember the date clearly because I'd been working late on a project due the next day, finally crawling into bed around 2 a.m. I fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from staring at my computer screen for 14 hours straight. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke up. Not gradually, not with that foggy transition between sleep and wakefulness. 1 second I was deeply asleep, the next I was completely alert, eyes open, heart racing. Something had woken me. A sound? A presence? I lay perfectly still, listening. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps moving across my living room floor. My first thought was burglary. Someone had broken in and was walking around my apartment. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, ready to call 911, but stopped when I heard something else. A voice, low and monotone, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. The voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded ritualistic, like someone reciting something from memory, over and over again. I slid out of bed as quietly as possible and crept to my bedroom door, which was partially open. Through the crack, I could see into the living room, dimly lit by the streetlights outside. A man stood in the center of the room, tall, thin, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned suit, the kind with a vest and pocket watch that you'd see in photos from the early 1900s. His back was to me as he faced the large window overlooking the street. His hands were raised slightly, palms up, and he was speaking in that same monotone voice. Now that I was closer, I could make out some of the words. Awaiting return, vessel prepared, threshold open. None of it made sense. None of it explained why this stranger was in my apartment at 3 a.m., performing what looked like some kind of ritual in front of my window. I should have been terrified, should have called the police, or at least confronted him. But something about the scene kept me frozen in place, watching. There was something almost familiar about it, like watching a play I'd seen before but couldn't quite remember. For nearly 10 minutes, the man continued his strange recitation. Then, abruptly, he lowered his hands, turned, and walked directly toward my bedroom door. I scrambled backward, knocking into my bedside table. The lamp wobbled, nearly falling. By the time I steadied it and looked up again, the man was gone. Not just out of sight, completely gone. I rushed to the bedroom door and looked out. My living room was empty. The front door was still locked. From the inside, chain still in place. The windows were all closed. No one was there. No sign that anyone had been. I searched the entire apartment. Not that there were many places to hide in an open concept loft. Nothing. No trace of the intruder. I even checked the hallway outside, thinking maybe he'd somehow slipped past me. But it was deserted at that hour. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd been dreaming. A vivid, unsettling dream. But a dream, nonetheless. I went back to bed, though. It took hours to fall asleep again. The next night passed uneventfully, and the next, I started to relax. to believe it really had been just a dream brought on by stress and too much caffeine. Then came March 10th. Once again, I woke suddenly at exactly 3 a.m. Once again, the man in the old-fashioned suit stood in my living room. Back to me, hands raised, reciting his strange mantra. This time I reached for my phone and recorded a video. In the morning, I played it back, half expecting to see nothing. But there he was, a tall, shadowy figure standing in my living room. The audio picked up his voice, that same monotone recitation. The video showed him turning, walking toward my bedroom, and then static. Just digital noise for a few seconds before the video showed my empty living room again. He'd vanished on camera. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a regular intruder, or even a regular person. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Not every night, but always at exactly 3 a.m. when it happened. Always the same ritual, the same words, the same vanishing act. I started keeping a log, trying to find some pattern to the visits. March 7th, 10, 13, 18, 21, 25, 28. April 3rd, 6, 9, 14, 17, 21, 25, 28. It wasn't quite every 3 days, but close. Some gaps were 4 or 5 days. I couldn't figure out what determined the schedule. During this time, I tried setting up better cameras, motion sensors, even a makeshift alarm system of string with bells attached. Nothing ever captured more than what I'd already seen. The motion. Sensors never triggered. The strings were never disturbed. It was as if the man existed in some parallel space that overlapped with mine only at certain moments. I started asking my neighbors if they'd experienced anything strange. Most gave me odd looks and quick denials before hurrying away. But one, an older woman named Mrs. Chen, who lived directly below me, invited me in for tea when I knocked on her door. Her apartment had the same layout as mine, but was decorated in a style that reminded me of my grandmother's house. Doilies on the armrests, china figurines on every surface, family photos covering the walls. "You've seen him, haven't you?" she asked as she poured the tea, not looking up. "The man who comes at night." My hands shook as I took the cup she offered. "Yes. How did you know?" "Everyone sees him eventually," she said matter-of-factly. "Those who stay anyway. Most move, out after the first visit. Those who don't..." She trailed off, taking a sip of her tea. "Those who don't what?" I pressed. She studied me for a moment. "How many times have you seen him now?" I counted in my head. 12. Over about 6 weeks. She nodded slowly. "And always at the same time? Always doing the same thing?" "Yes. 3 a.m. exactly, standing by my window saying strange things. Then he walks toward my bedroom and vanishes." Mrs. Chen set down her cup with a sigh. "His name was Joseph Blackwood. He owned this building when it was a textile factory back in the early 1900s. Brilliant businessman by all accounts, but troubled. Into things he shouldn't have been." "What kind of things?" "The occult. Spiritualism. It was fashionable in those days, you know. Seances and spirit boards and communing with the dead. But Joseph took it further than most. They say he was trying to open a doorway to somewhere else. Some other place where he thought he'd find power, knowledge. Whatever it was, something went wrong." I leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "What happened?" "There was a fire. April 28th, 1908. Started in the office on the top floor. What would now be apartment 5B. Your apartment." She gave me a significant look. 17 workers died, trapped inside. And Joseph, they never found his body. A chill ran down my spine. But the building survived. The outer shell did. Everything inside was gutted. It sat empty for decades before the renovation 5 years ago. She took another sip of tea. And now Joseph is back, still trying to complete whatever ritual he started over 100 years ago. I struggled to process this. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as an old woman's ghost story, but I couldn't deny what I'd seen with my own eyes. What does he want? Why is he in my apartment? Not just your apartment. He appears wherever. His office used to be. The developer reconfigured the interior during the conversion, so parts of his office now overlap with 3 different units. Yours, the one next door, and the one across the hall. From what I've gathered over the years, talking to various tenants, he appears to all of them. Always at 3 a.m. Always the same ritual. But what does it mean? What's he trying to do? Mrs. Chen's expression grew serious. No one knows for certain, but according to local legend, Joseph was attempting to create a permanent gateway between worlds on the night of the fire. The ritual required specific timing, a particular alignment of stars that occurs only once every 30 years. And the last one was almost exactly 30 years ago. My mouth went dry. And the next one? April 28th, 2 weeks from now. I went back to my apartment with more questions than answers. That night, I researched everything I could find about Joseph Blackwood and the factory fire. Most of what Mrs. Chen had told me checked out. There had indeed been a devastating fire on April 28, 1908. 17 people had died. Joseph Blackwood's body was never recovered, but there was more. Details Mrs. Chen hadn't mentioned. Reports of strange lights seen in the factory windows in the days leading up to the fire. Workers complaining of hearing voices, of tools moving on their own, of sudden cold spots on the factory floor, and Joseph's journal, partially recovered from the rubble, with entries that grew increasingly bizarre in the weeks before the fire, talking about thinning the veil and preparing the way and finding worthy vessels. I didn't sleep that night, or much at all over the next few days. I considered moving out, breaking my lease, but something kept me there. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper, some pull I couldn't explain. April 28th approached. The visits from the midnight tenant continued, still following that irregular pattern I couldn't quite decipher. But something was changing. The ritual was lasting longer each time. The words were becoming clearer, more urgent, and I was beginning to understand them. That was the most unsettling part. Words that had sounded like nonsense before were starting to make sense to me, as if I was learning some forgotten language. Awaiting return became awaiting the return of the watcher beyond the stars. Vessel prepared became the vessel is prepared for your manifestation. I was understanding because something wanted me to understand. Something was changing me, night by night, visit by visit. I should have left. I know that now. But by then it was already too late. On the night of April 28th, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in my living room waiting. At precisely 3 a.m. he appeared, not fading in gradually or walking through a door, but simply there one moment when he hadn't been the second before. Joseph Blackwood, the midnight tenant. This time he wasn't facing away from me. He was looking directly at me, and I could see his face clearly for the first time. Handsome in a severe way, with a high forehead, deep-set eyes, and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore the same old-fashioned suit I'd seen before, complete with pocket watch chain draped across his vest. "You've been watching me," he said, his voice normal now, not the monotone chant of previous visits. Every night, learning, preparing. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. It was as if his gaze physically held me in place. "It's time now," he continued. "The stars are aligned. The gateway can be opened. But I need a vessel for what comes through. A body. Your body." He began to move toward me, hands outstretched. I tried to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like being trapped in a nightmare where danger approaches and you're frozen in place. Just as his hands were about to touch me, my front door burst open. Mrs. Chen stood there, breathing heavily, holding what looked like an old leather-bound book. "Joseph Blackwood," she shouted, "you are not welcome here." Joseph turned to her, his face twisting in rage. You've interfered before, and I'll keep interfering," she said firmly. She opened the book and began reading from it, not in English, but some language I didn't recognize. The words harsh and sharp. Joseph seemed to flicker, like a bad television signal. He took a step toward Mrs. Chen, then stopped as if hitting an invisible wall. His form grew less solid, edges blurring. "This isn't over," he hissed, eyes still fixed on me. "The gateway wants to be opened. It will be opened." Then he was gone, not gradually but all at once, like a light being switched off. The paralysis that had gripped me released instantly. I collapsed onto the couch, gasping for breath. Mrs. Chen hurried to my side, the book still clutched in her hands. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" I shook my head, still trying to process what had happened. "What was that? What did you do?" She held up the book. This was Joseph's. His actual journal, not the fragments they found after the fire. My grandmother worked in the factory. She took it the day before the fire, sensing something was wrong. It's been passed down through my family, along with the knowledge of how to stop him. Stop him from what? From opening the gateway, from letting through whatever waits on the other side. She sighed heavily. We've been doing this for generations, living in this building or near it, watching for the signs. Every 30 years, when the stars align, he grows stronger, tries again to complete what he started. But why me? Why my apartment? The center of the gateway is here where his office was, where the ritual began. He needs someone to be the vessel, the human anchor for whatever he's trying to bring through. And you, she looked at me with sadness. You were perfect. Alone, sensitive. You could see him from the beginning. And most importantly, curious rather than afraid. You stayed, watched, tried to understand. That's what he needed. A willing participant. Willing. The word hit me like a physical blow. Had I been willing? Had my fascination actually been drawing me into his plan? What happens now? I asked quietly. The alignment only lasts for one night. He's missed his chance this cycle. It will be 30 more years before he can try again. She patted my hand. You should move as soon as possible. Break your lease, whatever it costs. Get far away from here. I did. The very next day, I packed my essential belongings and checked into a hotel. Within a week, I had found a new apartment across town. I broke my lease at Westfield, paying a penalty that took nearly all my savings, but it was worth it. For a while, I thought that was the end of it, that I had escaped whatever Joseph Blackwood had planned for me. I didn't see him again, didn't hear his voice, didn't wake at 3 a.m. to find him performing his ritual. But sometimes, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I catch myself silently reciting words I shouldn't know. Words about gateways and vessels and watching stars. Words that make perfect sense to me now, though they're in no language taught on Earth. And sometimes I find myself checking the calendar, counting the days, calculating exactly how many years, months, and days remain until April 28, 2055, the next time the stars will align. I tell myself I'm just being cautious, that I want to know when to be on guard, when to be somewhere else, somewhere safe. But deep down, I know the truth. Part of me is counting down not out of fear, but anticipation, because something crossed over during those midnight visits. Not the entity Joseph was trying to summon, but something of Joseph himself. Some fragment of his purpose, his knowledge, his desire to open that gateway. I've caught myself standing by windows at exactly 3 a.m., hands slightly raised, whispering words I shouldn't know. Only for a moment, before I catch myself. Before I push away the urge, the calling, but the urge is growing stronger. And 30 years is a long time for something to grow. So if you're ever looking for an apartment, and you find a place that seems too good to be true, an amazing space, at a surprisingly affordable price, ask about its history. Ask if anyone has ever disappeared there. Ask if tenants tend to move out suddenly without explanation. And if you ever wake up at exactly 3 a.m. to find someone standing in your living room, performing some strange ritual only to vanish when approached, don't watch. Don't try to understand. Don't let curiosity keep you there night after night. Run. And don't look back, because some tenants never leave, and they're always looking for new roommates. Love the story? Show us with a like, hit that subscribe button, and share your scariest idea in the comments. And don't forget to tell us the time and where you're listening from. We want to know where the fear is spreading. I first noticed it on a Tuesday. I was putting the kids to bed, going through the usual routine. Stories, a glass of water, kisses on the forehead. Simple stuff. But as I walked past the hallway, I saw it. A door I hadn't noticed before. At E. First I thought maybe it had always been there, hidden behind the old coat rack or something. But no, it was new. I was sure of it. It didn't seem to lead anywhere, just into a blank wall. But the handle, shiny and clean, stood out against the wood paneling. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. I opened the door, half expecting a closet or maybe some kind of storage space. But what I saw was a room, empty, but lived in. A room that had never been there before. The floors were spotless, but there was a faint smell, like the kind of stale air that you get when something's been closed up for too long. The walls were bare, no windows, no furniture, just space. But what made it odd was the chair in the corner. It wasn't there the last time I checked. I would have remembered it. It was a small armchair, faded and worn like something from a thrift store. It looked out of place, like it had been used recently. I blinked, looked around again, but nothing had changed. The room was still the same, except now I could swear there was dust on the chair, a small imprint where someone might have sat. I closed the door, figured I was just tired, maybe imagining things. But the next morning, I saw it again. The door. It was still there, and this time I didn't hesitate. I opened it right away. The room was exactly the same, except this time there was a half-empty mug on the floor next to the chair. No one in the house had been up there, so how did it get there? I turned the house upside down, looking for any clue. I asked my wife, but she hadn't seen anything. The kids were asleep, and it wasn't like they'd been sneaking around. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next few days were a blur. The door kept showing up, sometimes in places I knew for a fact hadn't been there before. At first it was tucked away in the upstairs hallway. Then it was near the stairs, and one night it appeared right next to the kitchen. It was always the same, and always locked. I started checking it every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And each time the room was different. The chair would have a new stain on it. There'd be a piece of clothing like someone had just been there, but no one ever remembered being in that part of the house. There were mugs, books. Sometimes there were papers scattered on the floor, notes in handwriting I didn't recognize. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat down by the door. My heart was racing in my chest, and I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what was going on. I pushed the door open, not expecting anything, but this time it was different. The room looked well used. The chair, worn and faded as always, now had a blanket draped across it. A blanket I knew for a fact I hadn't seen before. It wasn't one of ours. It wasn't anything I recognized. I took a step inside. It felt colder than the rest of the house. Not freezing, but colder. Like it was holding on to something. I stepped toward the chair and noticed a mark on the armrest. A handprint, smudged and faded, as if someone had touched it and then walked away without wiping their hand. I ran my fingers over the spot. Cold. Something brushed against my leg, like a whisper in the air. But there was nothing there. I stood frozen for a moment, just staring. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. But nothing made sense. The door behind me slammed shut, and I jumped, my heart pounding. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the empty room. But when I finally opened the door again, it was gone. The room, the chair, everything. The door was just a door again, leading nowhere. I tried to get some sleep that night, but it was useless. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the room. About the fact that it kept showing up. Always when I wasn't expecting it. The next morning, I asked my wife again if she had noticed anything odd. She looked at me like I was losing my mind. I tried to explain, but she just nodded and went back to the dishes. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe it was all in my head. But then it happened again. That evening, when I walked into the living room, I found her standing by the door to the empty room. Her eyes were wide and she looked at me like she'd just seen a ghost. "Did you see it?" she asked. I nodded and she stepped aside. The door was open, just a crack. I could hear the faint sound of something moving inside. The room had returned, but this time, something was different. There were footprints leading across the floor, faint but unmistakable. They stopped right in front of the chair, and on the floor beside it was a single note. It was simple, just a line of scribbled words. "Why won't you leave?" We couldn't leave, though. We couldn't leave that house. The room was part of us, now, and we couldn't figure out what it wanted or why it kept coming back. All we could do was wait and pray it doesn't come again. It started with something small. At first I didn't think much of it, just a trick of the light, or maybe I was imagining things. You know how it is when you're living alone and the house creaks and settles at night. But it wasn't long before the oddness escalated. It wasn't just the shadows that seemed out of place, but the faces. I was in the kitchen one evening making dinner when I noticed something in the hallway mirror. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of a face peering over my shoulder. I turned quickly, my pulse picking up. Of course, no one was there. It wasn't that unusual for the reflection to play tricks on me, but something about the eyes stuck with me. There was a look in them, something cold and unfamiliar. A few days later, I was washing my hands in the bathroom when I caught another glimpse. This time I could see the face clearly, distinct features, sharp jawline, and a familiar but off-putting expression. Someone was standing behind me in the mirror, but when I turned around, I was alone. My reflection remained static, staring back at me. It got worse from there. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just by the reflections in the mirrors, but by something else. The faces became more frequent and they began to change, grow clearer, like the people in the mirrors were more real than I was. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, maybe a little paranoia. But one night, when I was standing in the hallway, I noticed a face in the bedroom mirror. It wasn't someone I recognized. The man in the mirror was watching me, his mouth moving, but no sound came out. His eyes locked with mine, and for a moment I felt a chill I couldn't shake. I went into the room to get a closer look. The reflection didn't change, but as I reached out to touch the glass, I saw his hand. His fingers slowly began to press against the other side of the mirror as if trying to reach me. My heart pounded in my chest. I stepped back, my breath catching. The reflection grinned. It was almost a smile, but not quite. More like a taunt. I spent the next few days avoiding mirrors as much as I could, but the faces followed me. The next time I passed the hallway mirror, I saw a woman's face. She looked at me with sympathy, but there was something wrong with her expression, as if she knew something I didn't. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see their faces. The man, the woman, and others who seemed to come and go with each new glance into the mirror. The real kicker came one evening when I was getting ready for bed. I glanced into the bedroom mirror one last time, half expecting to see something, anything out of the ordinary. But what I saw stopped me cold. There was a face I'd never seen before. It was a woman, but not just any woman. She looked exactly like me. Same hair, same eyes. It was like I was looking at a reflection of myself, but with one major difference. She was smiling. A wide, creepy grin that stretched too far. I couldn't move. The reflection seemed to be waiting, daring me to do something. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, until she spoke. It wasn't loud, but I heard it clearly, as if she was whispering directly into my ear. "Not everyone who lives here belongs here." I bolted out of the room, heart hammering. But when I returned later, the mirror was empty. Just my usual reflection staring back at me. I've been trying to ignore it all, but I can't. The faces are still there, and sometimes they don't even wait for me to look into the mirror. Sometimes they just appear in the corner of my vision, watching from the periphery, lingering just long enough for me to notice. And then they vanish. and I can't shake the feeling that one of them, one of those strangers, is waiting to take my place. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. But then again, where would I go? I guess they would find me no matter where I went. And I don't think I can outrun them forever. It felt like a dream come true. After years of searching, we finally found our perfect home, a large old house full of character and history, tucked away on a quiet street. The Hendersons were ecstatic, ready to put down roots and build memories. I remember walking through the front door for the first time, the creaking floors beneath our feet as we explored the rooms that would soon become our own. There was a certain charm to the place. The faded wallpaper, the wide wooden staircase, and the enormous kitchen that smelled of dust but felt welcoming. It was a bit of a fixer-upper, sure. Some work needed to be done, especially in the basement, but we were up for the challenge. The house was big enough for the three of us, me, my wife, Karen, and our little girl Ella. We had always dreamed of having a space like this, a place to call our own, away from the bustle of city life. The first few weeks were spent painting, cleaning, and unpacking. We were so busy making the house ours that we didn't pay much attention to the little things. Things like the strange low hum that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards in the living room, or the occasional faint knocking sound that would echo through the walls late at night. But we chalked it up to the house settling. It was old. After all, it had character. That was until we found the crawl space. It was easy to miss. Tucked behind a stack of old boxes in the basement, there was a small door, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. The door was old too, covered in peeling paint, with rusty hinges that groaned as you opened it. But when we pulled it open, what we found inside was something I wasn't prepared for. The crawl space wasn't just a dark, musty area for storage. It was occupied. Old furniture, blankets, and papers were scattered around. The walls were lined with old faded photographs, black and white pictures of people I didn't recognize, all posed in front of the house, but none of them looked like they had lived there recently. They were old, some frayed and torn, others still intact but faded with time. It didn't make sense. Why would someone leave all this behind, and why was it all in the crawl space? We didn't say anything at first, just quietly closed the door and went about our day. But after that, things started to get stranger. We noticed more oddities around the house, things slightly out of place, like the kitchen chairs moved when no one had touched them, or the radio that would turn itself on in the middle of the night, crackling with static. It wasn't enough to make us feel threatened, but it was enough to make me uneasy. Still, we were new to the house and we brushed it off. We were just getting used to a bigger space. These things happened, right? It wasn't until one evening, a few weeks later when we were clearing out the attic, that things took a darker turn. I'd been up there for a while, sorting through some old trunks and boxes, when I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a small journal, leather-bound and dusty, with pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was shaky but legible. The words on the first page still haunt me. I'm not sure if anyone will ever read this, but I have to leave something behind. There are things in this house, things that we can't explain, things that have been here longer than we have. And I fear that they're still here, waiting for us to leave. I don't know if we'll make it out alive, but I'm writing this down in case someone does. Please, for the love of God, don't stay here. I remember the chill that went down my spine as I read those words. Who had written this? Why had they left it behind? And why was it hidden in the attic, so far from the rest of their belongings? I read more of the journal, each entry becoming more frantic. The writer described hearing noises in the walls, the feeling of being watched, and strange occurrences that couldn't be explained. The most chilling part was when they mentioned the crawl space, the very space we'd discovered in the basement. The writer spoke of something living beneath the house, something that they believed had once been human but was no longer. It was vague and unsettling. But the last entry, that was the one that froze me in my tracks. We can hear it now. It's not just in the crawl space. It's in the walls, under the floors, in the very air we breathe. I don't know how long we have left, But if you find this, know this. Whatever's down there, it never left. I closed the journal with trembling hands, my mind racing. I went downstairs, the weight of what I'd read heavy in my chest. Karen and Ella were sitting in the living room, but the atmosphere in the house had shifted. It felt different, colder somehow. Even Ella, who usually filled the house with her energy, seemed quieter than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Later that night, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. The house was too quiet, too still. Every little creak of the floorboard sent my heart racing. And then came the knocking. It started in the middle of the night like someone tapping on the walls. At first it was faint, almost imperceptible, like the sound of water dripping somewhere deep inside the house. But then it grew louder, closer, as if whatever was making the noise was moving toward us. I got up, heart pounding, and grabbed a flashlight. I walked through the hall, checking every room, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I opened the door to the crawl space and the knocking stopped. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew hit me like a punch in the face. Shone the flashlight inside, but all I saw were the remnants of someone's life. Old boxes, furniture, and those same faded photographs. Nothing out of the ordinary, except for the strange new set of footprints in the dust. Leading away from the crawl space, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. Who had been here? And why had they left their footprints? Karen heard me and came to the door. Her voice was trembling when she spoke. "We need to get out of here," she whispered. "I don't know what's in this house, but it's not normal." I couldn't argue with her. I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was, but I knew we had to leave. We packed up that night, grabbed Ella, and left the house. We didn't even bother to call movers. We just ran. We never went back. We sold the house a month later, but even now I can't shake the feeling that the people who lived there before us never really left. Maybe they're still in the crawl space, still hiding, waiting for someone else to come and take their place. Don't know if anyone else has experienced what we did, but I know one thing for sure. The Hendersons are no longer living in that house. I never thought much of the doorbell camera, to be honest. It was just one of those things I installed because it seemed like the right thing to do. Security, peace of mind, you know? I mean, it's not like I'm paranoid or anything. I don't need 100 cameras around my house, just the one at the front door. It was a typical Sunday evening when I decided to go over the footage. I've been a bit of a tech junkie for a while now, and one of my little rituals is to watch the footage of the day. I find it oddly relaxing. Maybe it's because I'm so used to the quiet and the simplicity of my neighborhood. I usually only see the mailman, the occasional neighbor, or someone who got the wrong house number. That night, though, something was off. It started with a flicker on the screen. I didn't think much of it at first, figuring it was just a glitch. I rewound it a little and watched again, and then I saw it. There, standing at my front door, was someone who looked exactly like me. At first I thought I was seeing things, or maybe it was some kind of weird lighting. I mean, sure, I wear a hoodie sometimes and my hair can get messy, but this guy standing there staring at the door, he looked like me from every angle. Same height, same build, even the same slightly slouched posture. I couldn't make sense of it. I know the camera isn't perfect, but this was bizarre. The footage was clear enough to see him, no mistaking the face. So I fast-forwarded a little, thinking I was just imagining things. But then, there it was again. The same figure, pacing back and forth on my front porch. He kept looking down like he was checking his phone or fumbling with his keys. There was a moment when he turned toward the door and I could almost swear that his head tilted slightly to the side, as if he was looking through the window into the house. I stopped the footage right there and replayed that moment a few times. There was something about his movements that felt strange, too smooth, too deliberate. But it was so normal at the same time. I couldn't shake the thought that this was me. That guy, standing on my porch, looking just like me. He even had the same hoodie I wore yesterday. My heart was starting to race, so I took a deep breath and tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just someone who looked like me, a doppelganger or whatever. But then why was he standing on my porch acting like he was trying to get in? I kept watching. There was a moment when the guy turned the doorknob, and I felt the blood drain from my face. The door was locked, of course. I don't know what I expected, but I was almost hoping that the footage would just show him walking away. But no, he didn't walk away. He stood there for a long, uncomfortable few minutes, and then, right in front of the camera, I took a step back, like he was getting ready to leave. But instead of turning around and walking down the porch steps, he faded. Not in the way you'd expect, like a ghost or some dramatic supernatural thing. No, it was like the figure slowly dissolved into the air, like a mist vanishing into the evening. 1 second he was there, the next, nothing. I stared at the screen for a good minute, trying to make sense of it. I tried to tell myself it was a glitch, a malfunction of some kind. But the footage didn't lie. I grabbed my phone, checked the locks on every door, and made sure all the lights were on. My house felt colder all of a sudden, and I felt this weird tingling at the back of my neck. The problem was, it wasn't just a strange event that I could shake off. It was the fact that the guy on the footage looked just like me. Exactly like me. And he was on my front porch trying to get inside. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up going over the footage again and again. By the time morning came, I was exhausted. My mind kept racing, questioning if I had just imagined it all. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I finally decided to call the police, just to be on the safe side. They told me they'd send someone out, but they didn't seem too concerned. I guess they get calls like this a lot. People imagining things, misinterpreting security footage. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I was about to leave for work, I glanced at the camera one last time. And that's when I saw it. Something I hadn't noticed before. There, in the corner of the frame, just on the edge of the door, there was another shadow. It was faint at first, but it was there, and it wasn't the shadow of the guy who looked like me. This one was darker, more distinct, like it was crouching, almost as if it was hiding behind the door. I don't know if I was just imagining things again, but the feeling of dread came rushing back. And this time I couldn't shake it. I don't know who or what that other shadow was, but it's there, watching, waiting. And that's the last thing I'll be thinking about before I go to sleep tonight. But there's something I've noticed now. Every time I check the footage, the shadow is always there, just out of reach of the camera. And every time it gets a little closer, I don't know what's coming next, but I have a feeling it's only a matter of time before whatever it is finally steps into the light. Every morning, without fail, the doorbell rings at exactly 5 a.m. At first, I thought it was just some neighborhood kid messing around. You know, those pranksters who think it's funny to ring and run. But when I checked the cameras, there was nothing. No one. Just an empty porch, the early morning light spilling onto the steps. It started to become a routine. Every morning, the doorbell would ring, and I'd check the footage, only to see the same thing. Nothing. I'd convince myself that maybe it was some glitch or a sensor malfunction or the wind hitting the door in just the right way. But it happened every single day. It never stopped. At first, I tried ignoring it. I'd go about my morning like normal, just trying to get through my routine, but it was hard not to be bothered by it. There was something unsettling about it, the way the bell rang at the same time every day. It felt too intentional. One morning, I decided to get to the bottom of it. I set up a new security camera, one I'd placed right outside the door, just above the porch. I was determined to catch whatever was causing it. 10 a.m. rolled around and the doorbell rang again. I didn't even need to check the footage this time. I could hear the chime from inside the house. But instead of immediately checking the video, I grabbed my coat and went to the door. I opened it slowly, peering out into the early morning gloom. The yard was quiet, the air thick with fog. No one was there. Nothing but the silence of the street, broken only by the distant sound of traffic. No kid running away, no prankster waiting to laugh. Just nothing. I went back inside and checked the footage. The camera had picked up the usual view, the empty porch. No one was there. But then something caught my eye. A figure standing just in front of the door. It wasn't clear at first, more of a blur, like something out of focus. But as I watched, the figure started to take shape. It was tall, too tall, almost unnaturally so. And it was wearing something dark, a long coat or cloak I couldn't quite tell. But the strangest thing was its face, or lack of one. It was like there was nothing there, just a smooth, featureless surface where the face should have been. I paused the video, my heart racing. I zoomed in, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, right in front of the door, staring at the camera. The face was empty, like a void. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. The footage returned to the usual empty porch. I replayed it several times, convinced I was seeing things. Maybe the camera was malfunctioning. Maybe it was just a trick of the light or some glitch in the system. But the more I watched, the more I was certain something had been there, something that shouldn't have been. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to check the footage right away. I sat there staring at the clock, waiting for the bell to ring. And when it did, I didn't go outside. I didn't even look at the camera. I just stayed frozen in place, my heart thumping in my chest. By now, the sound of the doorbell had become an unshakable part of my morning routine. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It was a warning. A reminder that something strange and impossible was happening right outside my door. And then, the morning after that, I woke up to a different kind of ringing. The doorbell was louder this time, sharper, almost like it was calling to me. I rushed to the security footage, feeling my pulse quicken. There, on the screen, was the same figure, standing at the door, its featureless face staring directly into the camera. But this time, it wasn't alone. There was something else there. A second figure, smaller, standing next to the first. And this one had a face. My face, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. How could it be? How could that be me? Standing there at my front door, right next to whatever that was. The two figures stood there for what felt like hours. They didn't move, didn't speak. They just stared at each other. One featureless, one familiar. Then, just as the clock ticked past 5:30 a.m., they both disappeared. The screen went black and the porch was empty again. I didn't know what to think, or what to do. I haven't been able to sleep since that day. Every morning I hear the doorbell, and every morning I check the footage. But I've stopped going to the door. I don't want to know what's waiting for me out there. I don't know if it's a warning or a sign or something else entirely. But I do know this. I've seen things on that footage I can't explain, and I'm afraid of what will happen the next time I go to check the door. When Karen and I first moved into our new home, it felt like the beginning of something wonderful. A fresh start. The house was everything we wanted, spacious, airy, and full of light. It had character, with its old brickwork and wide windows that let in the sun all day long. We were excited to fill it with our things, create memories, and finally settle into a place that felt like our own. But there was something about the house that made me uneasy from the very beginning. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing you could point to and say, that's what's wrong. It was more like a subtle shift in the air, a kind of tension that lingered just out of reach. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house wasn't entirely ours. It was as if there was something else, something just beyond the walls, waiting to be noticed. At first I ignored it. Maybe I was just imagining things, I thought. After all, moving into a new home can be overwhelming. The unfamiliar noises, the creaks in the floorboards, the drafts in the corners, it all added to the newness of it. But then, little things started to happen. The first time I noticed it was during the day. I was sitting in the living room, reading a book, when I saw a shadow pass by the window. I thought it was a bird or a tree branch swaying in the wind, but when I got up to check, there was nothing outside. No sign of movement, just the quiet stillness of the neighborhood. It wasn't a big deal, just a momentary flicker, but it stuck with me. The next time it happened, I was in the kitchen and I felt something shift behind me. It wasn't a sound or a presence exactly, just a feeling, like someone was standing just behind me watching. I turned around quickly, but again there was nothing, just the empty space. But the feeling didn't go away. It lingered, pressing against the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I told Karen about it, and she brushed it off. "You're just adjusting to the new house," she said. "It's normal to feel like that at first." But she didn't seem quite as sure as she led on. I could see it in the way she looked at the shadows at night, the way she glanced over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't looking. Then the night started to change. At first it was just small things. Lights flickering, doors that seemed to creak open by themselves, whispers that echoed from the other rooms when no one was there. I'd tell myself it was the house settling or the wind moving through the vents. But as time went on, the feeling of unease grew stronger. I began to notice that, at night, the house didn't feel quite right. The air was heavy, thicker than it should have been, like something was pressing in from all sides. One night I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m., and I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from somewhere beneath the floorboards. At first I thought it was just a rodent or maybe a pipe making noise, but the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, more persistent, like something was scraping against the wood, trying to get out. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. I strained my ears, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise, but it seemed to come from every direction at once. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and went down to the basement. The sound was faint but still there, echoing through the walls. I searched every inch of the basement, but there was nothing to explain it. No pipes, no loose boards, no animals hiding in the corners. Just empty, dark space. I felt ridiculous for being so scared, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something I couldn't see. The next night, the scratching came again, but this time it was joined by something else. A low hum, a vibrating sound, almost like a voice calling out from beneath the floor. It wasn't English, though. It wasn't even a language I recognized. It was distorted, guttural, like the sound of someone trying to speak through water. I rushed to the basement again, but this time I was more cautious. I didn't want to get too close to whatever was making those noises. As I stood at the top of the basement stairs, I noticed something strange. The door to the crawl space was slightly ajar. I knew I hadn't opened it. Karen hadn't either. The crawl space had always been locked, but now it was open, just a crack. I couldn't explain it. I felt drawn to it, though I knew I shouldn't go near it. But I had to. There was something down there. Something that had been waiting. I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The air inside was cold, damp, and smelled of mildew. I shone the flashlight into the crawl space, trying to make sense of the shadows. What I saw made my stomach drop. There were footprints, fresh ones. Not just any footprints, but ones that seemed to lead deeper into the darkness of the crawl space. I hadn't seen them before. They weren't there when I checked earlier. My heart pounded in my chest as I crouched down, following the footprints with the beam of my flashlight. They led deeper into the crawl space, toward the farthest corner. Took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever I might find. But as I moved closer, I saw something that made me freeze. A figure. It wasn't fully human. Not really. It was tall, and its form was blurry, like a shadow with no solid shape. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its presence. It was standing at the far end of the crawl space, just out of the reach of my flashlight. The air grew colder, and the hum, the same distorted voice from before, grew louder. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, just as quickly, As it had appeared, the figure faded. It didn't vanish, not in the way that you'd expect, like a ghost. No, it simply shifted, became nothing, like it had never been there in the first place. I stumbled backward, slamming the crawlspace door shut. My pulse was racing, and my hands shook uncontrollably. I didn't know what I had just seen, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore. The next day, I packed our things. I couldn't explain what had happened or why it felt like the house wasn't really ours, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. Karen didn't argue. She could feel it too. There was something in the walls, something underneath the floorboards, something that wasn't meant to be here. We didn't even try to sell the house, we just walked away, leaving everything behind. We rented a place out of town, somewhere far away from the strange, unsettling feeling that had settled over us in that house. I've never gone back to that place, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the scratching sound, the whispers from beneath the floor. And I can't shake the feeling that something, or someone, is still living in that crawl space, waiting for the next people to move in. Maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they'll be smarter than we were, but I don't think anyone is ever truly meant to understand what happens in that space. Thanks for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed tonight's chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that keep you up at night. Share your favorite part in the comments. We're always watching, and remember, at Nocturnal Narrative Studio, the night never truly ends.